So the next collection of videos are all going to be looking at business behaviour. So we've looked at a lot of consumer behaviour and all the biases and all the impacts that factors that impact consumer behaviour. The rest of this chapter is all going to be about all the different things that impact business behaviour. So what we're going to start off by looking at is some of the traditional economic viewpoint of businesses. So how we assume they've acted in the past, and then start to look at how they respond to different positive and negative incentives. So, the traditional view of businesses. Basically, there's two central aims of businesses, and we discussed this a little bit in class in the last week. They want to maximise their revenue, and they want to minimise production costs. So, when we're talking about the term revenue, basically what that means is they're trying to maximise the amount they're generating from sales. So the business's revenue is like the quantity of what they sell times the price. So if I'm selling oranges, for example, and I sell 10 oranges at a price of $5 each, that my revenue is $50. It has nothing to do with my production costs. It's all about maximising the amount that I'm getting from selling products. So strategies businesses will use to maximise their revenue include things like advertising, innovating to find better products, and doing whatever they can to grow their market share. So what I mean by market share is basically they're trying to grow. So if we're selling, say, soft drink, and we might say we have a 70% market share, that means 70% of the market for soft drinks, people are buying from our firm. So when we're talking about market share, it's basically their share of whatever market they're in. So businesses use advertising, they use innovation to try and maximise their market share, and some businesses will often use aggressive pricing in the short term, so especially if it's a new product that people don't know about, they'll set their prices really low in the short term so people discover the product, they might enjoy the taste, and then they'll start to increase their prices. Other firms might offer lots of discounts and things like that, so they might offer a lot of vouchers for sporting clubs, so people will go in there, taste the food, and then they realise it tastes good, and they'll be more likely to buy it in the future. So basically, any business wants to maximise their revenue by selling a quality product at a competitive price. Businesses are also looking to minimise production costs. So they want to minimise their cost of wages. They want to minimise the material costs that they use in production, the amount they spend on equipment and transport and all these different things. So businesses aim to minimise their production costs, and one of the ways they do that is by becoming more productive. So it's really important that you've got a really strong definition of the word productivity. And productivity means that we're trying to increase our output per unit of input. So for example, if we had 5 people in the class making texters, their productivity would be increasing is if they could make 20 texters per hour instead of 10. So they want to maximise the level of output with a similar quantity of inputs. And by becoming more productive, we're able to produce more per hour and reduce our cost per unit. So if wages were to stay the same and we became more productive, we'd be able to lower our cost per unit for those texters. So by maximising revenue and minimising production costs, firms can maximise their profits, which is their sales revenue minus their cost of production. The traditional view of businesses is that they are self-interested and will do everything to maximise their own profits. They will act in their own self-interest. So businesses want to maximise their profits. Consumers wish to maximise their utility by buying things at the cheapest price that they get the highest value out of. So like that idea of consumer surplus. The value they place on a product minus the price. So if you value a dress at $50 and you pay $30, you've got $20 of consumer surplus, and you've maximised utility if that's the lowest price you could afford to pay for that dress. So generally the idea is that businesses acting in their own self-interest will produce what consumers want because that's where they're going to generate the most profit. So in a market economy, consumers determine what is produced as their buying decisions will be met because self-interested producers will produce what they want because that's what generates the highest profit. So as consumers' preferences change, businesses will reallocate resources into that area because that's where they're going to make demand. There's no point in producing things that consumers don't want. We assume that businesses will respond to higher relative prices. So in this example, if the price of bread goes from $3 to $5, while milk stays the same and potato chips fall, more resources will flow into bread because it's now relatively more profitable. So if the demand for a product increases, that will lead to more profits available, and that's where they will shift their resources. So relative prices is comparing the market price for different products or services. Relative profits is comparing the different profits. So businesses will shift more resources to where they're going to generate a higher relative profit. And we'll talk about what that means in the next video when we look at things like taxes and subsidies and things like that. But businesses acting in their own self-interest will shift resources to where they can generate the highest relative profit. That generally comes about by producing what consumers want. And it also comes about by maximising your revenue and minimising production costs.